All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. We're just a bunch of Kiss fans and we talk Kiss. So come along for the ride, you've got nothing to lose. Hey, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today to join us live. G. Chucko, Kiss Vids, Ronnie Parker, the man of the moment, Stargazer Max. This is going to be inspired by his topic today. Ghost Musician Union, Robert Miller, and I think that covers everyone for now. We've got Daniel joining us. We've got 69th Blizzard Ken joining us. And Mark, who I'm having way too much fun with messing when he joins the stream at the beginning of it, is also joining us. Let's go straight into the mailbag because this one's pretty interesting. This arrived this week. This is I Walked This Way by Kelly Kelleher, who was Aerosmith's tour manager and roadie 1973 through 1978, and then worked with other acts like Atom Bomb, whole bunch of things. But he was integral to the Aerosmith book that I did, because he was able to shine a light on a lot of Aerosmith history, and he would challenge me. I don't remember that. Oh, wait, I do remember that. Really fantastic guy who gave me a lot of time. But he also told me the stories about the Aerosmith versus Kiss road crew stories, the fights at Painter's Mill, and then later the battle with the lighting in Detroit. So we've heard the Kiss crew and the Kiss side of that equation. He gave me the Aerosmith point of view, and also early Ace Frehley story of Ace after I think it was a Dolls gig in New York City in late '73. So he's got those stories uncensored in this book. So if you like Kiss content cropping up, from the horse's mouth, I strongly recommend it. Obviously, the guy's a friend and someone who I care about a lot, but we know with the Kiss road crew how difficult life has been for these guys. This guy bears the scars. His first day on the job with Aerosmith ended up on the end of the gun from a club owner trying to stiff the band. So if you like reading those stories firsthand from legendary bands and those people who really got them on the road, there's enough Kiss content, I think, in this to justify advertising it here. Anyone else get any mail this week? Daniel, you had a t-shirt at the beginning.
Another week, another Kiss t-shirt. You always need a new one. So
yes,
I got this one. I'll rip it up. Rip it out. Let's see what it is.
Has to be 80s.
We'll see.
rip it out. Break my
Take
heart.
my heart.
From
Yeah, it looks good.
Got it
Nice
now.
colors. It's the Kiss
Is that the
Asylum.
membership? Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Yes.
Very nice, Daniel. Very nice. Don't forget to wash it properly.
Oh,
Yep.
membership, you said.
Daniel will be
nice.
back next week with the washing machine report for the t-shirt, and he'll show us whether it survived the process or whether he's got any additional tips for that particular print.
Forget the cold water and hang it outside if possible.
Oh,
Julian, I did get a notice that they shipped my Kiss Army membership T-shirt, so that'll be good. Probably next week.
All right. So what else have we had on the on the board this week? I've dropped a ton of videos. The where did it start? The Song's Not on Alive 2 dropped, I think, at the beginning of the week, and then there was some other stuff during the week. Mark, you had a question about the I Was Made for Loving You song story. What was that?
Yeah, so first of all, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done, and it was nice length, like half an hour. That was great. I love those kind of length things. I'm all for it. But I was wondering, because you've done so many of them, and my memory is not the best. Was this a song that you did like many moons ago and have just reposted it because maybe it was for members only or something? Is this a brand new content?
Brand stinking new. Last year when I was doing the 4th season, I had 2 songs left that I didn't finish, and I decided that I wanted to finish one of them and see if there's still enough interest, because everything's changing in the KISS community and how people consume KISS content, and there's a lot less consumption going on. So I want to see if there's still enough of an interest. Like the last one I did was Shandy, and that one did extraordinarily well, probably because it's a worldwide single with a lot more interest. So there were 2 left. I picked one to finish, and then I realized that it's actually the anniversary of the Dynasty album coming out, and it was yesterday, I think, or no, it's today, the anniversary of the release. So it just was happenstance that I finished, and I knew this was going to be a pain in the ass to do. I knew that I Was Made for Loving You was going to be a very long episode. And it was. I wasn't expecting to do a 30-minute song story, because these are supposed to be concise and focused. But I did keep it concise, I think, hopefully with enough flow. And it gave me an opportunity to go into the rehearsals and cherry pick some commentary. So if you haven't checked it out, do check it out. Again, I keep going on these if there's enough interest in them. If no one's interested in them, then I just keep, doing my own stuff that doesn't necessarily end up on YouTube. There is the printed version on the FAQ Scans site. If you know where that is, go to the main page of the KISS FAQ, and there's a link to it, I believe. I did recently revamped the Beth one, and that's up there as well. So Alex Bergdahl does a lot of similar stuff, usually in Swedish, occasionally in English. Who's the other guy? Iban. Emil also does a lot of those on his Axology word blog. His are fantastic. He goes deep. He goes insane, and he's very knowledgeable. And that's a little bit what I try and do with the song stories.
Well,
and the content.
I must say, though, that I would highly recommend that as fellow listeners out there, listen to it, check it out, give support to this, because I think it's fantastic. I thoroughly enjoy them, and to think of a world that we don't have these sort of bits of content would be an utter crime. So please, let's support it, because I want to hear more.
Hey, Julian, quick question about that. Peter was on that demo,
rehearsal.
So that rehearsal was for the album, right? So
I don't think we know,
because
I don't think we know the whole context. He's there.
Yeah, is there? Yeah, I'm kind of curious whether he had his accident before or after that, because he was a no-show except for Dirty 11, really. So
allegedly, but here
allegedly
he is.
The question.
Here he is working out I Was Made for Loving You, clearly woodshedding the damn song, because it's not arranged. If you listen to that, they're structurally working it out, and the rest of the hour is them working all different things. But Paul does say one interesting thing during another section of it, and that's he's talking about the ramps. So he's talking about the stage design, which in January had been presented at the business meeting. So it's a little bit of weird, and we don't have enough context for the whole thing. But Peter's there. That's why I deliberately put that part in where they're using his name and also talking about this is what Peter suggested 30 minutes ago.
Ace said,
to show.
right?
Yeah, I think so.
That sounded like Ace saying that comment.
It might be the tape
about
speeds.
how they were going to structure the song or the solo.
Yeah, Desmond Child's in there, Vinnie Ponce is in there, Gene's in there. There's another part of it where they call out Gene. So he's there on bass, but the 2 guys who alleged weren't involved in that song are both part of the rehearsals, and that's again why I put that in. And then the rest of it's basically just Paul Stanley talking about creating it and Gene bagging on it and not liking it. So it was fun. There's another part where I think there's like someone shouting at Peter, and you can't hear what he's saying in the cans to understand the context. I really do recommend those rehearsals. They're tough to sit through, especially some of the crappy quality ones that are out there. But I want to listen to Shore. I'll probably do a song story to Shore Knows Something if I continue with the series down the road, and so I'll have to listen to that one. I can't remember if I've done Dirty Livin'. But when you've got all that material, you really have to, and I use AI to separate out the vocals, especially during the spoken parts, which are usually separate good enough to get better clarity on what they're talking about. So Thank you for taking us off topic. Lost half our listeners already.
We all.
All right. Well,
geez.
we do have a topic today, and this topic comes from Stargazer. Thank you, Max, for the email. And I thought it was really interesting because, number one, it's a current topic on the board. That's actually, I think it's gone to how many pages? How many bannings? It's up to 6 pages. But let me just read the setup for this conversation today, which is inspired by one of the threads on the forum. I think it could be interesting if you and the guys discuss minority opinions, perhaps. There are a lot of examples over there in the unpopular opinion thread. I definitely feel I have some minority opinions, and it would be really nice if they were discussed in a respectful manner, obviously. That's what we try and do. So, Max, we're going to get started with yours. And our first 3 going against the grain unpopular opinion discussion points is your first paragraph. Sometimes it seems that if you don't just prefer 70s Kiss over the rest, or don't think Alive is the greatest thing, or don't think the reunion in 1996 was the second coming, you are a fool. All right. That's throwing down the gauntlet pretty hard and heavy straight to begin with. Daniel, let's break that down and go with what you think about. Let's go with the first part of, if you don't prefer 70s Kiss over the rest, you're a fool.
I can't agree with that, but I do understand that if you started out in the mid 70s as a Kiss fan, following the band, and Peter and Ace were so important to the band, and then suddenly everything changes in a few years. You lose Peter, you lose Ace, you lose the makeup. I do understand the disappointment for those fans, but for me, my first albums were Animalize and Asylum in '85, so I don't have the same connection to the 70s era. I think, to me, it was a fantastic. They had a fantastic history. The band, I enjoyed the stuff they did in the 70s, but I listened more to Animalize and Asylum for quite a few years, and to me, they did a lot of great records during the 80s, and to me, it was like the opposite when the reunion started. My band kind of died, so it was sort of a disappointment to me. And then watching them live I think I watched them live 2 nights in '97 at Stockholm Stadium. I was so disappointed of how they sounded. It was spectacular. The whole city wearing Kiss makeup, but man, Peter Criss couldn't hold Eric Carr's or Eric Singer's jockstrap by that point of time. So, it was such a disappointment the way he sounded live. But it was a great experience nonetheless. But I can't say that the reunion was the second coming of Kiss. It was way worse than they sounded just the previous year in Japan and Australia.
Wow. Mark.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat with Daniel. I mean, to be honest with you, when I first got into Kiss, it was right around that time when Lick It Up came out. I remember, I think I mentioned this a few times on the podcast, that my sister got me the 45 for Lick It Up. And, they started playing that stuff on Much Music here in Canada, the video for Lick It Up and stuff like that. And All Hell's Breaking Loose and stuff like that. And then, of course, when Asylum came out, it was all over. I was in a fully, Kiss Army member then, because I was loving that record, and I still love that record. It's my favorite non-makeup record, period. And while I'm not going to be so harsh about the reunion as Daniel, I mean, but in a lot of ways, what Daniel said is true. I mean, if you were used to seeing Kiss around the time of, like, Hot in the Shade, if you went to that tour, excuse me, and if you went to the Revenge tour as well, you were used to a certain quality of performance and musical ability and stuff like that, and then to hear them with the original guys, you got to call a spade a spade. I mean, there wasn't anywhere near the same technical power to it as it was before. I mean, what they had the advantage of then was that they had the massive stage show behind it. They had the marshals coming up and all this stuff and fireworks and this and that. So it kind of took you away a little bit from noticing that, Peter's like feathering his drum set a little bit, and he's, keeping it a little safe on some of the things and stuff like that. But, I'm not going to say I didn't have a good time. I enjoyed the shows for sure. I mean, the energy was there. All the people from the old guard that were there were like losing their brain, and people were grown men were crying. And the original Ace and Kiss is back. Like, I can understand because they were loving that, right? But for people like me and Daniel who were like loving the whole Eric Singer edition and loving, how, by this point Bruce Kulick's being very smoothly into the group setup now, and he's just playing unbelievably well. It sort of felt like a bit of a step back.
Yeah, I'm going to go next, Ken, because you're a 70s guy. We'll let you stick the knife in all of us to end the topic when I finish. But, becoming a fan in the 80s, I think, who was it? Chris, who said it's where you came in. So it's an unfair question. And I think that to a certain point is 100%. It's not an unpopular opinion to prefer your entry point into the band. The 80s is what made me a Kiss fan, but Eric Singer replacing Eric Carr changed my view of the band. I wasn't a big fan of what they became. I really think they had improved and become a powerhouse 93 to 95. Don't think Alive 3 was that great. And I hated the reunion was my first response. That this is killing my band, by revamp or turning back the clock. It was taking away from me my future, though there probably wasn't a future for Kiss at that point, as we'd seen from the reaction to Revenge and potentially Carnival of Souls. Emotionally, that didn't register. So I had a very negative opinion of the reunion. And I started digging back into the 70s. And, I was doing the tape trading, and it really changed my perspective on things because I was hearing all of these Alive Worldwide shows, some of which were fantastic. Your House and Is My House and Burning Stockholm. The list goes on of some of the fantastic recordings of 96 in particular. And then I heard the recordings, got the tapes from the 70s. Toronto 76, Anaheim 76, Fort Worth, Summit 77, all of those. And then I'm like, wow, now that is Kiss. And that's where I really started to shift from being a big fan of the 80s into being an originals, I'm not going to say only, but an originals primarily fan. Now, was it an unpopular opinion? No, I don't think it's an unpopular opinion to say I'm a big fan of Crazy Nights era Kiss because that's the album that made me a fan. If you're British or wherever you are, I think that's completely valid. So I agree with Chris Flood in the comments there. I don't think that is actually a minority opinion as such. Can't you evolve beyond your entry point? I think I've just kind of, I don't know if I devolved by going backwards, but I certainly changed from my entry point. But I've been like that with most of the bands I'm a fan of, whether it's Iron Maiden or Aerosmith for that matter. I became a fan with Done with Mirrors, and I prefer the 70s to the 80s and beyond. So again, it's Judas Priest. The only band I haven't evolved with is AC/DC, but that's their fault for not evolving themselves. So, Ken.
Yeah, well, for me, I can see. I mean, you're not a fool for liking one or the other. I look at it like they both, the eras, the 70s eras, and then the later era, 80s and beyond. There's no right or wrong there. I mean, you like what you like. You're going to prefer, if you prefer one thing over the other, that's fine. Yes, I came in on the 70s. I do prefer the 70s. I think it's, better song and song output and so on.
So you
than
didn't
they
evolve.
had later. Yeah, evolved. But it could be the other way too. So the 80s. I look at the 80s that if someone prefers the 80s or later after over the 70s, that's perfectly fine. It's just a matter of taste, and some of it is when you came in, and some of it isn't. Like you, Julian, you kind of went to the dark side, or what do you want? I don't know what you want to call it, but to the
Backwards.
70s from the 80s, and because you discovered the other music that happened before the non-makeup era. So yeah, I don't think it's so much an unpopular. I mean, some people are that way. It's like there's nothing, after 1980, everything's cut off. It's like there's nothing, anything after that's no good. I don't believe in that at all. That to me is an unpopular opinion. If one or the other, and you shooting rockets off there, Julian. Anyway, yeah, nothing much to say other than that.
Well, let's go into the second part of that then, and Ken, we'll just go straight to you. If you don't think live is the greatest thing, you're a fool. Is it a minority opinion to prefer a different? I'm only asking
This is
you
why
first because of Alive too.
I'm a fool because I like Alive too, and again, that was my first Kiss album I bought, and that's a special place in my heart, and I do love it. Even with all the crowd noise pumped in, I just think it's a great live album. Sure, they fixed things there, just like they fixed things here and there on the live. But I don't think live is my favorite. It's almost equal, I'd say, both of those. You want to say the tie thing, but Alive 2 is, I know Daniel likes Alive 3, for instance. Do I think he's a fool for that? Liking that? No, I don't think you're a fool, Daniel. It's all right.
But that's emotion. That's emotion.
It's just
as
just an emotion, an opinion. What type style he likes, whether it's the band members and how they play, and then all that stuff, fall into that. So, yeah, I don't think I'm a fool for liking Alive 2 the best over Alive. So,
well, Daniel, are you in the minority or a minority and prefer Alive 3 over Alive or Alive 2 because that's your more representative of your entry point?
I have to say that Alive 1, you can't touch that. But if I count the amount of times I listen to the albums, I'm sure Alive 3 gets the most listens. So I guess it's my favorite, even though I can see the greatness of the first Alive album.
Mhm.
But growing up or becoming a fan in the mid 80s and being a teen in the early 90s, I like a bit heavier sound. I like the double kick drum. I like some of the fills Eric Singer added to some of the old stuff. So if I would pick my favorite Deuce version of Deuce, I'd actually go with Alive 3, or maybe some of those club dates they did in 92, or the tour they did in 94, 95 there when they couldn't tour in America, so they went overseas. I have a hard time, going back and listening to live albums or live takes from Kiss from the 70s. I miss the drumming from Eric Singer, so I guess I'm a child of the time, so to speak. I like a bit more metal, so to speak, a bit more advanced feels. The drumming changed a lot from the 70s to the 90s, and Eric Singer was a modern drummer. Peter Criss never caught up to that. He was a 70s drummer all the way through, even through the reunion. So that's what I miss the most. I love how Gene sings that version on Alive, and I love the gritty guitars, but you miss some of the fills. So I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but I like Alive 1, Alive 3. Alive 2 is a bit further down, I have to say. Mostly because of that terrible audience sound. It destroys the complete album.
The shrill trebles.
Got to block it out, Daniel. Block
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Mark.
Well, I think my answer is going to be a little bit different in one sense, because like the live albums, I Live 1 is the first one I got. I got it for Christmas from my sister. I really enjoyed it. As I got older and started learning a lot more stuff about record making in general, the whole knowledge of learning how these records were actually made sort of put them a little bit more in, not as exciting anymore to me based on that. But the thing that I'm going to say though overall is that I find that the live records overall, whether it's Alive 1, Alive 2, Alive 3, the live videos, like the bootleg videos and that, I prefer those over the actual records, because those are the actual live performances without any doctoring, without any special polishing up. There's no flying in 7 spools of different audiences and to make it sound like they're in a real, you know, they didn't just keep Peter Criss's drum performance and redo everything else. You know, those performances like on the Cobo Hall bootleg videos, that to me is special. When I watch that, I'm like, wow, that's Kiss in its element. You can hear every little mistake and stuff like that, but that's what made it so great. Same thing with Alive 3. When you watch those performances that they did that were available on video, those shows were great. You know, they were far from perfect as well, but they were damn near close to perfect on some nights. Those guys were fantastic. And I think that it's kind of a shame that we've been brushing over Eric Carr, because when his drumming was fantastic too, he did some great stuff there too. My only quirk with Eric Carr was his drum solos. Not that I don't like drum solos. I love drum solos, but he always seemed to do the same things all the time. Like, and the only thing that got annoying was that he always did that. Like, stop playing that. Like, it was so. But anyways, I think he was fantastic. You know, he was great. He also stepped up the band quite a lot. And if you watch like the Australia 1980 shows with him, fantastic. I'll take those videos over the recorded live albums any day of the week. Maybe I'm crazy for that. See, there you go.
But there was such a great shift in hard rock music. You know, just imagine Peter and Ace on Creatures of the Night or Animalize, or it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And if they would have played like they did in the 70s, no one would have cared. So actually, it was great that they got a sort of a hiatus from the band until people rediscovered the 70s once again in the mid 90s.
Yeah, and we're lucky to have had these different drummers completely change the dynamics of the music in different ways throughout their history. Alive, I mean, I've never not thought Alive's the greatest thing since sliced bread in terms of the live albums, and it only took MTV Unplugged to ever get anywhere near that in terms of an emotional response to an all-around live album. And the Unplugged thing, it just stands on its own as a separate kind of thing. Alive 3, I was laid up in, where was I? Buckingham, broken patella. So I was on crutches, knee in a brace, on opiates. And I had a reaction to that it felt like Alive 2. You know, as an album, I was thrilled that it existed. But like Mark has just said, you give me Montreal 92 or some of the other soundboards from 92 to 95, without what Eddie Kramer unfortunately did to the Sonics, and I'll take those any day in terms of a live album. I've become a purist, more of a purist. I don't like the double kick, you know, where it wasn't present prior, because it really does change the character of the song. And I don't mind it in one sense that it's a representation of the now and the current drummer and their aesthetic, but I'd much rather go listen to Alive than listen to Alive 3. And someone said Alive 4. How dare you? Which Alive 4? Because Alive 4 Symphony isn't anything to write home about more so than the proposed Alive 4 Millennium. Those are both. Those are just paper bag inducing.
Actually, you can say that the Millennium concert, go and listen to Paul Stanley's vocals on that one. They are pretty great on that one, but that's about the only thing.
Yeah, well, pretty great compared to the next 25 years, but there we go. Let's get into that third part of that first statement. Or I think we've already covered that if we don't think the reunion was the second coming.
Yeah, we've covered that.
Yeah, I think the last thing on the reunion was I hated all those fair weather fans who came back and were preening pheasants, pardon me, not peasants. You know, like they were the big brothers from the 70s came back to bully the younger kids. Like, oh, this is my band's back, my band. And it was an ownership issue. There was a competitiveness. Like, I'm like, well, where the hell were you in the 80s? Yeah, way to support your team, fair weather fan. And they disappeared nearly as fast to be replaced by rich people who could simply buy their way into pole position. So I think that's not even a minority opinion. I think for us fans who have come from the 80s, perhaps we feel it a little bit more than fans of the 70s. Ken never left. You did drop out slightly here and there, didn't you? But you never abandoned Kiss. You never just gave it all in and went and listened to Joey Travolta, become a right Stella. Instead, I just hated those people. They were so freaking pompous. And that's a lot coming from me. So there you go. All right. Yeah, so Max is, I feel that instead I've actually been a trooper sticking up for Kiss in the 80s, so getting ridiculed even today by those 70s Kiss fans who dropped Kiss like a turd in 1979, 80, or 81. It feels pretty shitty. And then there were those fans return for the reunion, pissing all over 80s Kiss again. So what is the frustration there? I mean, anyone... Mark or Daniel in particular, as the 80s fans, do you feel that way?
What about the old guys coming back and claiming ownership over it?
Yeah.
I mean,
like the big sibling.
Yeah, where were you, Mark?
I understand, because I remember, and this is no word of a lie, when I went to see them on the Lost Cities tour, the second run that they did there in Hamilton, I heard one guy that was like about 2 rows up behind me, right before they were about to start. I think the opener that night was Econoline Crush, I think was the opener. And right when they were done, I remember him talking to some people behind him. I think he must have brought like his nephew or something. He's like, Tommy, now you're going to hear the real deal Kiss. Like I heard him, like I was like, oh God, here we go. Like, what you've been listening to, that ain't the real Kiss. You're going to witness it tonight. All right. And I kept rolling my eyes thinking, like, come on, man, like that you're doing this kid an injustice saying that, because there's a lot of credible stuff in the 80s and 90s to even performance wise that you could steer him towards and stuff like that, just because he didn't like it. I never liked that part of it. And on one hand, I kind of almost felt vindicated somewhat, because that was far from Kiss's best performance on that tour. I mean, I think I told that before. That was the time when Ace, fell over on stage and Gene just shook his head and waved the roadie out, told him not to pick him up, just leave him there till the end of the song. I mean, it was one of those performances where they were already starting to get on each other's nerves already at that point. So, I mean, I can only imagine the nephew looking at him saying, that's what you witnessed all those times in the 70s. Like, because it wasn't stellar, but again, I can understand where they're coming from, because my sister was very much a huge Kiss fan. I was always telling those stories about how we would hang out with her friends and they had all the posters on the wall and stuff, and they were living and breathing Kiss all the time. But some of those guys, though, they didn't drop off either, though. They kind of stuck around with it. But man, there were a lot of them, though. From that 96, 97, there were numerous times I heard people saying that. And there was always some old guard guy. Like I remember one time my car blew a tire on the highway, and the tow truck guy came and we were talking about stuff. I had a Kiss shirt on. He even asked me, he goes, "Hey, you going to the upcoming Kiss show?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm going for the Toronto show." And he's like, "Cool, man." He goes, "You're a young guy." He goes, "You're gonna get to see the real Kiss, man, in its full glory." And I was like, "Oh, here we go." Like another guy. There was rampant that kind of thinking back then. But I think Julian's right though. Once the honeymoon was over, those people disappeared and were off in the shadows again.
Danny, before I go to you, I've always found that being a Kiss fan's a little bit like being American. And let me explain that as an immigrant. I've always found that the number of people who kind of claim lineage going back to the Mayflower in this country is like the number of Kiss fans who claim lineage going back to 1974. You get to the point where so many people claim to have been fans in 1974 or descendants of Mayflower people that boat would have sunk 1,000,000 times over before it ever left Plymouth Harbor. So it's always been one of those strange things between the generations of you'll never be a real American because you weren't born here, is what I was told when I celebrated receiving citizenship at school. And I was told that so many times in my youth. I've also heard it that you're not a real Kiss fan, Daniel, because you became a fan in the Unmasked era.
I'll just kick their ass as I said that.
Sniper rifle.
Well, I think I think for me it was like, how do you say, a castle in the air, the whole reunion thing, because even though I was just a teenager, I could hear that they didn't sound as good as they did with the other guys in the band, Singer and Kulik. I saw that they didn't move around on stage as well as they did previously. But the thing that I thought was that upsetted me the most was that people got on the bandwagon. I remember being at shows in '97 and people are there dressed up in Kiss costumes, in full makeup. And when you approached them and talked to them, you kind of understood that they didn't know a single song from Kiss, so that was the big thing for me. I didn't care that the '70s fans came back. I think that was a good thing, but these hanger-ons, these, just following, there's a big hype about Kiss. We love them. We don't know anything about it, but it seems great. It was like, I remember outside of Stockholm Stadium in '97, there were loads of fans in makeup, and I like to talk with people, so I went around and spoke to a lot of people, and quite a few times people didn't know any Kiss songs other than Heaven's on Fire and Rock and Roll All Night. So and it made me kind of mad. You're just here for, it was like they were expecting the second moon landing or something. It was like, ooh, this is so exciting. But I guess they dropped off pretty quickly after that. But that was the thing that got me a bit angry. People just pretending to like the band, but they didn't know the music.
Yeah, that's normal with any band these days. Yep. I'm more annoyed by how things changed. From that reunion point of view, we move into the dynamic pricing and elitism within the Kiss Army. And that to me became more of a big deal, where things were being designed for wealthy Kiss fans or for people who weren't even fans, who simply wanted to check a box, buy front row at a Kiss concert if you've got $2,000, buy the instruments and all that. That really became, and I'm guilty. I participated in a few of those, but I think it damaged the band. Let's get back to some of these unpopular.
One quick opinion you missed for me.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. I think they became like when the reunion happened, they became like a flavor of the month. So you got those people came out, just whatever is the latest and greatest thing. Oh, I'm gonna go see them. I don't know if they say Kiss is good or whatever, and I might as well go check it out or whatever. Yeah, they didn't know anything about it. I remember going to get tickets for that reunion show, thinking, even though I went early in the, I don't know, morning, late, early morning, whatever, not too early, but a couple hours before, there was a long line. I was like, what the heck's going on? Because just a year or two, before, for all these other concerts, I'd be right up in front. No one was going, I was able to get tickets right away. So therefore, I was like, wow, what's going on here? I was like, where were all these people before on these other tours? And they came out of the woodwork. It was just like, it was crazy. And so therefore my seats were way the hell back because it was reserved seating. I was like, shoot, why am I, I'm so freaking far back. I couldn't believe it. So that was just like, in a way that kind of pissed me off, because I was like, where were these people? I was always out here getting tickets for every freaking show every time they came through town or whatever. And so that part of it really kind of, I got on my nerves. And then, yeah, they disappeared. Those people disappeared after that, those tours or that tour. Pretty much that was it. And then it was back to the normal routine for KISS tours.
No, or the new normal with the dynamic pricing and all those changes. Just imagine if the reunion had meet and greets, and they did have kind of meet and greets back at the hotel afterwards. But imagine if they'd had those Ticketmaster scams that have killed the industry. Let's go into, what you think your biggest minority opinion is, something that really goes against the grain. I'll loop back to you after we do the first question from the actual thread that kind of inspired this conversation. But I'm stupid and I'm lazy. Great username, by the way, a recent user posted this thread on the FAQ, and they posted, here are some of my unpopular opinions. Let Me Know is a very underrated song. I don't think that is particularly a minority opinion. I've never heard anyone say anything overtly negative about Let Me Know as a song. They say Tomorrow and Tonight is unfairly maligned. I don't think it's unfair. Ken, that's off your album, Alive 2, and Love Gun Era is unfairly maligned.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's okay song. It was just too much of trying to go write another rock and roll all night. So yeah, it's not a bad song. It's just it's a good song, but not great to me. It's not super great.
Then Daniel, I guess this would be a good one for you. Sonic Boom was their best album since Dynasty.
Whoa!
That's
going against the grain. I think that's really going against the grain. Well, however, it was great effort from KISS to retrace their roots with that record. However, it sounded a lot of the time as a 80s album. It was like a mixture between 70s and 80s KISS. So I liked Sonic Boom, but come on, Lick It Up, Creature of the Night, even Animalize and Asylum, Revenge. I would put all those albums way higher than Sonic Boom. But I still like Sonic Boom. I think it was a great comeback, all considering.
Yeah. All right. You've had enough time to think, Mark. What do you think is your biggest against the grain opinion?
That's simple, and I mean it's been one that I've been pirating and trumpeting all the time. Is that everybody has this great love about Destroyer, saying that it's the greatest thing that's been ever made by KISS, and I still say it's the biggest piece of crap that's ever been released by KISS. Still to this day, it is going from those first 3 records and Alive to that. Must have been like the ultimate kick in the groin. I mean, seriously, it's like it's so polished, it's so un-KISS-like in every way possible. I just never understood this great love for it. And I mean, and then of course proven correct, because the next record, Rock and Roll Over, everybody loves that record. How many lists do you see where people name that the number one, their favorite KISS record of all time, Rock and Roll Over? So obviously, if Destroyer was this great monumental record that they made, then it would be number one. And I have not seen many lists where that beat Rock and Roll Over. Not many at all.
Can't you
So
just say though, Mark?
And I say what?
Can't you just say that Destroyer is overrated? Maybe
No, it's overrated. I mean, it wasn't overrated because it didn't even do that good when it first came out. If it wasn't for Beth, then it wouldn't have even probably wouldn't have even gotten platinum. If it wasn't for that. So I mean, come on. I think that record has gotten way too much attention, and it still bothers me to this day that whenever they play stuff live, they pull the majority of it from that. Pull it from Rock and Roll Over more songs. I mean, come on, man. There's way better songs on that. I mean, I still love, don't get me wrong, I love Detroit Rock City. I love Shout It Out Loud in a live capacity, but on the studio recording, I don't like all these pianos and bells and whistles and calliopes and who knows what the hell else they're putting in here. Just that stuff is not, that does not ring out Kiss to me. That to me is just them this is Ezrin trying to be Ezrin and turn that into an Ezrin record more than a Kiss record.
I've often thought that you lay it on rather thick with the Destroyer hate. But I think we've seen in the comments, it is fact that a lot of the original Kiss fans of 73 to 5 were really turned off by what happened when Kiss partnered with Bob Ezrin. And that is simply fact. There was fear inside the band of what have we done? We're going to piss off our fans. I don't think that Destroyer is necessarily an unsuccessful album as such. It is simply not as successful as they hoped from that Alice Cooper, Bob Ezrin type partnership, because it had done 890,000 copies before Beth ever took off on the charts. So I don't think I think Mark is actually became a fan a decade too late. That he's actually the ghost of Kiss fans 73 to 5, representing that black leather army, but in their reaction to what the hell is this? So, Mark, I don't think you're that far off base to what is actually revisionism. That it becomes that Destroyer is the greatest thing in the Kiss catalog. Well, sales are there because basically Beth did save it, but it also had a pretty damn good start. Not as great as they wanted before it takes over. And it is, in terms of artistic expression, their most successful album. It's not, if The Elder had taken off decades later and was at a similar level, would people be, revising their opinions of that? So it's a similar sort of thing. Daniel, thoughts on all that?
I just see a headline on Blabbermouth. Destroyer is the ultimate kick in the groin. That was great from Mark. No, I can't really agree with Mark's sentiment there, but I do understand it was a big change in how Kiss sounded, so it might have turned off some fans, but I mean, Detroit Rock City, Shout It Out Loud, God of Thunder, King of the Nighttime World. I mean, even though if you don't like the production, they are still great songs. But I do understand it's a bit of a different record. However, I don't care for songs like Great Expectations and stuff like that, or Sweet Pain. So to me, there are some clunkers on the album, but still a great album.
Ken, going back into the 70s, you would have known some people probably who might have said, I used to like Kiss until they came out with that damn Destroyer album. Did you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know a heck of a lot of Kiss fans. But I think, again, that going back when I became a Kiss fan, going back and listening to that record, it was a weird kind of experience, the sound of it, the production of it. So that's the only thing where it seemed like it was not, I don't know, it was kind of polished, overproduced. I do agree that, like Great Expectations, I like the demo version. I wish Bob Ezrin wouldn't have put all that extra crap on there on that song. I think it left it more of a like an acoustic type ballad kind of a song, and I think it would have been a lot better and with the original lyrics, of course, too. So yeah, it was kind of a weird. It's not the sound that I like for Kiss. At least guitar. I want them more up front and out loud and raunchier sounding. So that's why Rock and Roll All Over, was such a great bounce back from Destroyer.
Daniel, for you, what do you think is your opinion that goes against the grain the most?
I'll have to go with non-makeup era Kiss versus late makeup era Kiss. I'd say that the opening track on the first 3 albums, when they took off the makeup, almost beats everything they did on Dynasty, Unmasked, and The Elder. I prefer Exciter, I've Had Enough, Into the Fire, and King of the Mountain over almost everything on the 3 latest album they released with the original guys, so to speak. Unmasked, Dynasty, and The Elder. Creatures of the Night is sort of a great album, but I'd say the opening tracks on the non-makeup albums from 83 to 85 were awesome and beats the crap out of what they did on Unmasked, Dynasty, and The Elder. I guess not too many people think that.
Mark?
Well, I'll agree with that. I mean,
Yay!
as much as I love Dynasty, like I said before, and I've said it a million times, it has such a great vibe to it. It always makes me think of New York City, and maybe Unmasked to a little bit lesser extent. But I think overall, as far as power and energy and stuff like that, you can't compare sort of, Into the Fire and the King of the Mountain and stuff like that to like I Was Made for Loving You and Is That You and even Is Just a Boy. I mean, or even The Oath. The Oath maybe might be the only one that'll give it a bit of a competition in some aspects, but overall, but I think, Daniel, and I don't know if you'll agree with me with this, is that you have to kind of look at the circumstances too. Back then, Dynasty, Unmasked, and then maybe The Elder, they were kind of still sitting good. They had their big $2 million contract that they got there, and or multiple millions contract they had, so they were sitting pretty. But when they were doing those other records, they were already under the knife with the record label. They
under the gun.
Yes, they were under the gun with the record label. They had a lot of pressure. They lost a lot of the audience, so they have to come up with some really energizing Kiss music to get the people back into them. So I think it's almost like 2 different moods of the recordings. Like the first 3 that you like, the older ones, they were like, yeah, we're just going to continue what we're doing. We're good, But the later stuff, they had to like really, to put into another gear to try to bring people back into it.
Yeah. Ken, your thoughts on that, and then what you think your greatest going against the grain opinion is.
Well, I understand Daniel's thing with the 80s versus the later makeup period. Yeah, I think that 80s period was better than the later makeup period as far as production of the songs or album output. Starting with like Psycho Circus through Sonic Boom and Monster, that was a drop off. Those albums don't even compare to the Asylum and those Lick It Up and so on, that period of time. So I see from there. But if you're talking about Dynasty and Unmasked, yeah, those were very more popish production, but those are still great. Some had some really great music on it, and great solos by Ace, who I think was in his prime as far as soloing, coming up with solos. So, and then the Elder is just kind of an outlier in a way, you know. Even though I love the Elder, so it's just kind of an outlier. So anyway, I guess maybe a couple of things that I wrote down. I had a list of stuff, but one of them, I mean, just a quick one. The Elder, since I just mentioned the Elder, I said the Elder should have been. It would have been better. I don't know if it would have sold better, really, but I keep thinking that it would have been a better idea that if the record company would have left it alone and just released it as it, was originally intended. Yeah, I don't think it was so bad. I think it would have been a better representation of what they were going for, instead of screwing with the song order and taking out audio, verbiage or whatever, spoken word stuff. I think it would have made more sense, I guess, to people. Otherwise, another one I had was, I said Kiss could have made it without the makeup from the beginning. I think they would have still made it. Maybe not to the level, but I still think they would have made it as a pretty good rock and roll band with a following, without the makeup. That's one of the reasons I say that is because, for instance, Neil Bogart, he was going to go for them, sign them just based on the music he heard alone and the sound. He wanted them to get rid of that. He thought the makeup was just an extra, kind of baggage, I think. So I think based on the music alone, which I think has always been great, it's all about the music. I still think they wouldn't have made it without having that, great music backing the makeup. The makeup's kind of like that cherry on top kind of thing. And that got them to that next level, higher level. I don't know if they would have made it that high level, but they still would have been, I think, a renowned, pretty good, solid band with a good following. I still think they would have made it somehow.
I think that's a good
Really,
point.
eh?
The people listen with their eyes. The music has often been disregarded because of the music, and in the 70s, it was the critics who were disregarding Kiss simply because of the visuals, and dismissing their music, when it's the music that kind of got people's attention first, before they ever saw the band. And then the fans became guilty of the same sin in the 80s. With Asylum is my prime example of that. Of the fans became the critics and were guilty of listening only with their eyes because of an album cover as an excuse. And I don't hear any difference between Asylum and Animalize overall, and even to a degree, Creatures and Lick It Up sonically, production wise. And I think that the fans, in a sense, become as bad as the critics. Well, we know they did in the end anyway. But I think if I'm going to go against the grain, I'm going to say that I think that Kiss is the largest, most encompassing cult band of all time. I think that Kiss fans and the band have an oversized perception of how great Kiss actually is and how meaningful in the bigger scheme of things Kiss actually is. Kiss will never be a Led Zeppelin. Kiss will never be a Who, a Rolling Stones, even in some ways an Aerosmith. Kiss is always got the hype going against it and for it, in a similar way to the listening with the eyes, the stage show, and all of that, skews perception about how big it is. But Kiss's, sales figures don't go anywhere near a lot of other groups of the period.
Mm-hmm.
They made more of the money on selling trinkets and flashing things. Yeah. So from that perspective, I love Kiss, don't get me wrong, but I also don't have a false sense of how important or how big they are. And that's something that I think a lot of Kiss fans become extraordinarily tribal in their opinions, that if you say anything like Kiss isn't the biggest band in the world, we're the greatest, hoorah, 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 USA. Sorry, start doing the instead of same thing, different angle. So I mean, is that outrageous to say Kiss is, basically a gigantic cult band with a rabid following? We are rabid. We're nuts. We're loopy.
I don't think that's crazy to think. I mean, look at Rush. For a long time, they said the same thing, that they were like the ultimate cult band for a long time. I think up until like Moving Pictures, almost, that they were saying that people thought that. So I don't think it's unheard of to think that. I think people think that until a band hits like some monstrous, sales figure. It's like, maybe you can say that about, let's say, like Whitesnake. Those first couple of records that they did up until like 87, you could have thought that they were the ultimate cult band. But then when 87 hit, everybody and their brother knew them. So now all of a sudden they no longer had that cult status anymore. So it's not that preposterous to think. I think that Julia made a lot of sense with that, to be honest.
Ken, I just insulted your life by saying that you're a big fan of a cult band.
No, I mean,
other than Blue Oyster Cult, and that's a good cult band to be a fan of.
Yeah, no, they are kind of a cult band. It's and going back to my point is about like making it and so on. The makeup turned off. Radio DJs didn't want to play it. They thought it was a joke. A lot of people didn't get on board with Kiss fans because of the makeup. That's another reason I thought, they would have made it. But for you, the cult, yeah, they're a big cult band. I mean, yeah, Grateful Dead was a big, cult band, and there's a couple others out there, of course, but yeah, I don't know. You have to be, I think, a certain person or a type person and be into certain kind of things to love Kiss and be a diehard Kiss fan. But again, still, it's more about the music. And like I said, it's the makeup stuff. That was just the extra kind of, frosting or whatever, cherry
icing on the cake.
Icing on the cake.
Daniel, final thoughts?
Well, I think you're kind of downplaying Kiss's importance with a quote like that, because I guess it's different. It's very different where you come from. I mean, we have listeners from Brazil, the UK, America, Canada, Holland, and all over the place. I guess it's different in different parts of the world, and I can only relate to Northern Europe. And over here, Kiss has influenced and motivated a whole lot more musicians than Led Zeppelin ever did. If you listen to interviews with rockers in their 30s, 40s, 50s over here, everyone name drops Kiss as a big influence. They might have stopped listening to Kiss by a very early age, but it was Kiss that was the catalyst in order for them to start. Yeah, I'm just trying to find the translations here in my head. It takes a while, but so I think they have been very important. I think they're almost underrated as a band, because over here everyone mentioned them as an influence, and guitar players mentioned Ace. I mean, when Ace died, the radio blew up over here. People were hailing Ace. I couldn't see it. I didn't see it coming. I thought it would be, a little bit about Ace. There were radio programs for hours about Ace, how important he was, and so on. So over here, at least, I can't talk about, South America or Central Europe or America, but over here, Kiss is much more than a cult band, and they have influenced more people than Led Zeppelin ever will.
Yeah, come on. Look
There
at
you
the
go.
number of people who admit to having posters of Ace Frehley on their wall, or Peter Criss for drumming, and perhaps even Gene for bass, and Paul as a frontman. They have definitely inspired a lot of people, but I think a lot of the people also that they inspired wouldn't necessarily have admitted at the time that they were a fan of Kiss, because it would impact their credibility. I think it's in later years that it becomes easier for them to say, when Ace passes, all of a sudden all these people are inspired. Now, a lot of them were absolutely, inspired by Ace, and they're being inspired by Beck and Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend indirectly through Ace. So interesting topic, Max. Again, minority opinions and all that, it's very subjective. It's very difficult to say, well, that really is just deliberately trying to get a rise out of someone by saying something, where I think we all have things that we like more than other people for whatever reason. A lot of it comes down to emotion. A lot of it comes down to where we come from or the time in which it occurs. So really cool topic. A lot of really great comments in the chat today. So thank you all for chiming in. Rodrigo, yeah, a lot of good comments from you. Thank you very much. Stargazer, you've been busy on the keyboard there as well. So, that's a going against the grain for you listening to this show. What is your thing that you think is the greatest personal going against the grain opinion that you have? Why don't you chime in the comments? Let's see what you think. What do you think about some of the things that we've mentioned today and from the thread and Max's email as well? But for now, that is it. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us. If you liked what you hear, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any content. But for now, from Daniel, Mark, Ken, and myself, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the message board and discuss the topics we've broadcast today. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you've listened to this show, and a like would very much be appreciated. We hope you'll join us again, but until then, remember, life's a radio. Turn it up to 10.